stop looking at your bank balance like it's some kind of scoreboard for your success, because in reality, it's just a countdown to zero that you've been conditioned to ignore. It is January 2026, and the piece of paper you're clutching in your hand, that US dollar, has officially transitioned from a global reserve currency into a legacy suicide note. You've been told for decades that the system is rock solid, that the Fed has the tools, and that inflation is just a temporary ghost in the machine. But the data I'm looking at right now tells a much more violent story. While you are distracted by the latest manufactured political outrage or the manipulated earnings reports of tech giants, the physical silver market just executed a lethal blow to the dollar's juggernaut. We aren't just talking about a price increase, we are talking about a systemic bank run that started in the dark and has now reached the point of no return. The evidence is staring you in the face, from the massive price gap between the COMEX in New York and the Shanghai Gold Exchange. When you see silver trading at $113 in the West, while the East is aggressively bidding it up to $115 and beyond, you aren't looking at a simple arbitrage opportunity. You're looking at the sound of the global financial system snapping in half. The institutional framing of this crisis is perhaps the most brilliant and disgusting lie I've ever witnessed. The mainstream media is still trying to package this as a speculative frenzy driven by retail traders, but the footnotes in the institutional ledgers tell a different tale. The big banks, the ones that have been shorting this metal for a century to suppress the dollar's true devaluation, are currently trapped in a kill box of their own making. They've spent this past week throwing every algorithmic weapon in their arsenal at the market to force a crash. They hiked margins 3 times in 72 hours. They triggered massive flash crashes in the overnight hours when liquidity was thin, hoping to scare you into dumping your physical holdings so they could cover their billion-ounce short positions for pennies. But for the first time in history, the bluff didn't work. The physical metal is vanishing from the vaults at a rate that is mathematically impossible to sustain. London's LBMA and New York's COMEX are becoming ghost vaults, filled with paper promises and IOUs that nobody believes in anymore. Every ounce that leaves the West for the East is another brick removed from the foundation of the dollar's hegemony. You think you're safe because you have money in the bank, but you don't even know what money is. You have a digital credit in a system that is $34 trillion in debt and is currently undergoing a wholesale liquidation. This silver bank run is the heartbeat of the collapse, because silver is the primary industrial and monetary link to the physical world. Unlike the dollar, you cannot print more silver to pay off the interest on your previous silver. As of this morning, the physical supply deficit has hit a staggering 25%, a number that is virtually a death sentence for the modern industrial complex. From the AI servers driving the new economy to the solar grids and the military hardware, the world is realizing that it needs the metal more than it needs the paper. The global split is now a physical reality. While Western investors are still being lulled to sleep by the wealth effect of a manipulated S&P 500, the Eastern powers have stopped accepting your digital digits in exchange for their real commodities. They are calling the bank run on the entire U.S. Treasury system, and they're using the silver and gold markets as the exit ramp. I've watched the internal flows of the major bullion desks, and the panic is palpable. They are no longer trading for profit, they are trading for survival. They are desperately trying to source physical bars to meet delivery demands that are coming from sovereign wealth funds, not just silver stackers in their basements. This is a wholesale rejection of the dollar. When gold sits at $5,000 and silver crosses the $100 mark and refuses to come back down, the full faith and credit of the United States has officially left the building. You are holding a currency that is being rejected by the very people who produce the goods you buy. The arbitrage gap is the smoking gun that proves the Western central banks have lost control over the price discovery mechanism. The market has moved from price discovery to panic discovery. And yet, you're still sitting there, checking your 401k app, thinking that the numbers on the screen represent actual value. Those numbers are just the echoes of a dying empire. And by the time the echo fades, there will be nothing left but the cold, hard reality of what you actually have in your physical possession. This isn't just a market correction. It's an autopsy of the dollar's credibility. For 50 years, the dollar was as good as gold because the world had no choice. But that choice has been made for them by the sheer weight of American debt and the weaponization of the financial system. The silver bank run is the first domino in a sequence that ends with the total domestic devaluation of your purchasing power. Every time the Fed prints another billion to bail out a regional bank or to fund a foreign war, they are stealing the life force out of the bill in your pocket. They are burning your house down to keep their furnace going. The reason the silver price is exploding is that the market has finally realized that the dollar is a burning building with no fire exits. The smart money has already jumped. The institutional players have already moved their dark pool capital into hard assets. They are leaving you with the paper, the promises, and the debt. They want you to stay calm. They want you to stay invested. And they want you to keep your head down until the very second they lock the doors of the bank and tell you that your money is now their bail-in capital. The data doesn't lie, but the people who report the data do. They'll tell you that the economy is resilient, while the very plumbing of the system is leaking radioactive waste. They'll tell you that silver is volatile, while they ignore the fact that the dollar has lost 99% of its value since the Fed was created. This weekend was the turning point. The moment the markets closed with a $2 price gap between New York and Shanghai, the one-world financial system died. We are now living in a fractured reality where your wealth depends entirely on which side of the physical wall you are standing on. If you're standing on the side of paper, you're already a casualty. You're just like the people in 1920s Weimar Germany who thought they were millionaires right up until the moment it cost 1 billion marks to buy a loaf of bread. The silver bank run is your final warning. It's the last bell ringing before the floor falls out from under you. If you can't see the evidence in the vaults, in the price gaps, and in the desperate margin hikes of the banks, then you deserve exactly what's coming for you. The dollar isn't just dying, it's being replaced by the truth. And for most people, the truth is going to be the most expensive thing they ever encounter. Now let's stop looking at the surface ripples and start looking at the Leviathan moving beneath the black water. You think the price on your screen is the reality? That $113 silver is the market price? Wake up. The real price is being decided in places you aren't invited to. The dark pools and the private settlement desks where the desperation has reached a fever pitch. While you're watching a public ticker, the major bullion banks are engaging in a frantic, clandestine game of musical chairs. I've seen the internal ledger movements from the Depository Trust and Clearing Corporation. There is a massive, unprecedented divergence between the paper claims and the deliverable ounces. We are looking at a leverage ratio of nearly 400 to 1. That means for every single ounce of physical silver sitting in a registered vault in London or New York, there are 400 different people who think they own it. It's a mathematical impossibility that is currently collapsing under its own weight. This isn't just a shortage, it's a total integrity failure of the Western financial plumbing. Look at the yield curve on the U.S. Treasuries if you want to see where the real blood is leaking. The 10-year and 2-year spreads aren't just inverted anymore. They are screaming in a language of systemic insolvency. In this January of 2026, the bond market has effectively stopped functioning as a safe haven. It's become a giant smoldering trash fire that everyone is trying to run away from at the same time. When the smart money realizes that the risk-free rate is actually a return-free risk, they flee into the only thing that has zero counterparty risk. That's why the silver bank run is accelerating. The big institutional desks, the ones I used to trade with, are no longer accepting cash equivalents for large-scale settlements. They are demanding physical delivery. They are calling in their leases. They are demanding the bars, not the receipts. And when the big boys start demanding the bars, the retail investor gets trampled in the doorway. The most damning evidence of this data horror is the blowout in the basis trade. For years, hedge funds have been printing free money by exploiting the tiny differences between the cash and futures markets. But that trade just blew up. The liquidity in the silver futures market has evaporated because nobody wants to be on the short side of a rocket ship. We are seeing limit-up days becoming the new normal. In the dark pools, large blocks of silver are being traded at premiums of 25% to 30% over the spot price just to secure immediate delivery. If the spot price is $113, the real get-it-now price is closer to $145. That gap is the sound of the system breaking. It's the sound of the elites paying a panic premium while they tell you on television that everything is under control and that you should stay invested in your broad-based index funds. They are lying to your face while they outbid you for the last remaining lifeboats. Take a look at the repo market, the very heart of the global banking system. We're seeing fails to deliver hitting levels we haven't seen since the 2008 crisis. But this time it's not about mortgage-backed securities. It's about collateral. The system is starving for high-quality collateral, and since the dollar has lost its luster and the bond market is a graveyard, the world is rediscovering that silver and gold are the only collateral that doesn't rely on a politician's promise. The global split I mentioned isn't just a geographical divide, it's a structural divorce. The East is now setting the price based on physical weight, while the West is desperately trying to maintain its grip using paper derivatives. But you can't suppress a volcano with a paper lid indefinitely. The pressure has reached the point of no return. The commercial signal in the Commitment of Traders report shows that the big four banks are currently underwater, to the tune of tens of billions of dollars on their short positions. They are effectively insolvent, being kept alive only by the stealth bailouts from the Fed's emergency lending facilities that they aren't reporting to the public. You want to know why your local coin shop is empty? It's not because of supply chain issues. It's because the wholesalers are being outbid by sovereign wealth funds. We are seeing nations in the global south quietly liquidating their treasury holdings and swapping them for physical silver and copper. They've seen what happens when the U.S. weaponizes the dollar, and they've decided they'd rather hold a metal that's been money for 5,000 years than a digital currency that can be deleted with a keystroke in Washington. This is the macro domino that nobody is talking about. When the central banks of the world stop trusting the dollar, the game is over. The silver bank run is just the leading edge of a global dollar bank run. We are watching the transition from a trust-based system to a truth-based system, and in a world of truth, the dollar is found wanting. I've spent the last 48 hours dissecting the liquidity flows coming out of the euro-dollar market. The contagion is spreading. The banks in London are facing a massive margin call on their silver shorts, and they don't have the dollars to cover it. So what are they doing? They are selling everything else. That's why you're seeing the stock market looking jittery despite the record earnings reports. It's forced liquidation. They are burning their furniture to keep the furnace going, hoping that a miracle will happen and the silver price will crash back to $30. But a miracle isn't coming. The physical reality of a 25% supply deficit in industrial metals is a math problem that no amount of financial engineering can solve. You can't print the silver needed for the AI servers, the solar grids, and the cruise missiles. You either have the metal or you don't. And right now the West doesn't. This is the deep meat of the catastrophe. It's a multi-layered failure where the technicals, the fundamentals, and the geopolitics are all converging on a single point of impact. The bond spreads are telling you the government is broke. The dark pools are telling you the banks are desperate. And the physical shortages are telling you the dollar is finished. You're being told to look at the consumer price index to measure inflation, but that's a rigged metric designed to hide the truth. The real inflation is visible in the silver-to-dollar ratio. It's a vertical line. It's a heart monitor of a patient in full cardiac arrest. And the doctors, the central bankers, are just standing there, frantically printing more medical bills instead of performing the surgery needed to save the system. They've chosen to let the currency die so they can protect the banks. They've chosen their own survival over yours. You understand the gravity of the negative basis we're seeing? It means the market is so desperate for physical metal right now that it's willing to pay more for silver today than it is for silver delivered in the future. It's a total inversion of a healthy market. It's a sign that the future is no longer guaranteed. When a market goes into permanent backwardation, it's the market's way of saying, I don't trust the system to exist in 6 months. That is the verdict of the global silver market in January 2026. It is a vote of no confidence in the entire Western financial structure. And while you're debating which AI stock to buy, the foundation of the building you're standing in has already turned to sand. The liquidity trap has snapped shut, and the only people who are getting out are the ones who realized that the money in their bank account was never really there to begin with. It was just a digital shadow, and the sun is finally setting on the empire that cast it. So what does it feel like to stand on the edge of a cliff while the person behind you tells you that gravity is just a theory? That is exactly where you are sitting today, in January of 2026, clutching your digital bank balance like a religious relic, while the very ground beneath the financial system has already liquefied. The time for warnings is over, and the time for the ghost protocol has begun. When the smoke clears from this silver bank run, the world isn't going to look like a correction or a recession. It's going to look like a total architectural redesign of human value. And most of you are currently scheduled to be the scrap material. You need to understand that the global split we are witnessing between the paper shuffling west and the commodity hoarding east is the final divorce of reality from illusion. While you were worried about your social media engagement or the latest political theater, the fundamental contract of the dollar, the promise that you could trade your labor today for an equal amount of goods tomorrow, was shredded and fed into the furnace of $34 trillion in unpayable debt. The most brutal truth I can give you is that your local bank is no longer a storage facility for your wealth. It is a liquidity trap waiting to be triggered. In this high-velocity environment where silver has shattered the $100 ceiling and gold is knocking on $5,000, the banks aren't your partners. They are your competitors for the few remaining real assets. When the bail-in protocols are inevitably activated, and they will be, because the FDIC doesn't have a fraction of the capital needed to cover a systemic run, your deposits will be converted into worthless equity in a failing institution. You will be handed a piece of paper that says you own a bank that owns nothing but bad debt and empty silver vaults. That is the cold execution of the middle class. The people who think they are diversified because they own 5 different tech stocks are actually 100% concentrated in a single failing asset class, the US dollar. If your wealth requires a functional power grid and a centralized server to exist, you don't own it. You're just renting it from the people who hold the delete key. Look at the people in the smart money circle, the ones I used to sit next to at the institutional desks. They aren't talking about yield anymore. They are talking about possession. They are abandoning the digital ghost world and moving into the physical realm with a ferocity that should terrify you. They are buying the silver, they are buying the copper, they are buying the productive land, and they are doing it with the very dollars they are desperate to get rid of. They are effectively trading their monopoly money for your future. And the most tragic part? You're letting them. You're sitting there waiting for the dip that will never come, because in a hyperinflationary collapse, the price doesn't go up because the asset is more valuable. The price goes up because the currency is being discarded like trash. Silver at $113 isn't expensive. It's a reflection of how cheap the dollar has become. When you realize that, you'll understand that the bank run isn't about getting your money out of the bank. It's about getting your wealth out of the dollar. You need to shed the weight of your illusions right now if you want to be anything other than a casualty. Stop listening to the financial planners who are paid to keep you strapped into the sinking ship. Their models don't account for a world where the primary reserve currency loses its credibility in a single weekend. They don't have a spreadsheet for a global split where the East refuses to settle trade in paper digits. The new world order is being written in ounces and grams, not in bits and bytes. If you can't hold it, you don't own it. This is the era of the hard truth, where the only things that will have value are the things that are essential for survival, and the things that cannot be printed. Silver sits at the intersection of both. It is the blood of the technological world and the heart of the monetary world. That's why the vaults are empty. That's why the price gap between New York and Shanghai is a yawning chasm. The world is voting with its feet, and it's walking away from the American experiment. The silence you hear from the mainstream media regarding the silver bank run is the loudest warning you will ever get. They only stay silent when the truth is too dangerous to manage. If they told you the truth, that the vaults are depleted and the dollar is a dead man walking, the entire system would vanish in an afternoon. So they keep the lights on, they keep the tickers moving, and they keep telling you that inflation is cooling, while your grocery bill tells you otherwise. They are keeping the sheep calm, while the wolves finish their meal. The question you have to ask yourself is whether you are a sheep, a wolf, or a ghost. A ghost is someone who has already exited the system, someone who doesn't show up on their ledgers, someone who holds the physical metal and waits for the reconstruction. I'm not here to offer you comfort or a buy signal. I'm here to tell you that the window to act is closing with every tick of the clock. This isn't a game of wealth maximization anymore. It's a game of wealth preservation through a systemic reset. When the dollar finally hits the floor, when it truly becomes the scrap paper that its math dictates it must be, the people holding silver and gold won't be rich in the way you think. They will simply be the only ones with the capital to buy the world while it's on sale. They will be the new aristocracy, while the paper holders will be the new peasantry. That is the verdict of January 2026. The macro domino has fallen, the institutional framing has failed, and the bank run has moved from the shadows into the light. So keep your dollars, keep your digital promises, keep your faith in the people who have lied to you for a century. Or you can look at the data, look at the vaults, and look at the price gap, and realize that the game is over. The global split is the end of the line. The silver bank run is the final whistle. I've shown you the autopsy, I've given you the data horror, and I've laid out the cold execution of the dollar. What you do next isn't my concern. My job was to tell you that the building is on fire. If you want to stay inside because you like the wallpaper, that's your choice. But don't say you weren't warned when the roof comes down. The dollar is done. The silver is gone. The truth is here. Survive it or don't. It's your move.